What's up, people? This one's a little bit late, but let's go ahead and put it out anyway. It is time to check in and see what games are going to be worth watching for Seahawks fans in college football tomorrow. And there are actually a lot of really good games, really interesting games, compelling games, and you're going to have a pretty packed schedule if you decide to partake. So I will say that as the college football season goes on, I think that our priorities are kind of shifting a little bit. We're starting to understand that certain players are not as interesting as they used to be, and other players are going the other way. They're moving up. So with that in mind, I am making some minor adjustments to my, I don't know if you would call it a formula because it's not precisely mathematical, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about here. It's a little different than it was at the start of the year. I think the things that we're looking for have changed just a little bit. So tomorrow at 9 a.m., we've got two games that I think are especially compelling for Seahawks fans. 9 a.m., ABC, Ohio State versus Northwestern. There is still some very small but non-zero chance of CJ Stroud, and I'm going to continue to play the CJ Stroud game because CJ Stroud is, at this point, the one quarterback in this draft class who I would pick over Geno Smith for the next 3-4 years. At this point, every other quarterback you could get, I would either rather not have, or I would take as a developmental guy behind Geno. So if it's not CJ Stroud, I'm much more inclined to take my chances with Geno at this point. Levis hasn't had the year I was hoping. Bryce Young still doesn't really do it for me the way I was hoping. Guys like Tyler Van Dyke completely fell off. Spencer Rattler is basically a ghost at this point. Tons of more examples, like Will Rogers, Devin Leary got hurt. CJ Stroud to me is the one guy I look at and I go, I would rather have him on a rookie deal for the next 3-4 years than have Geno on a big deal for the next 3-4 years. So I'm going to stick with him. And even if CJ Stroud's a pipe dream, which admittedly he's closing in on, you've got other players on that Ohio State team that are compelling. You've got Zach Harrison, the defensive end. You've got their kicker. So that's still a good game. 9 a.m. ESPN, we have Florida versus Texas A&M. Florida has Anthony Richardson, and at this point, watching a guy like Anthony Richardson might be more valuable than watching a guy like even C.J. Stroud, because Anthony Richardson's going to be available probably in the next draft after this upcoming one. So he might actually be more interesting to a Seahawks team than anyone else. Because of the way this season is broken, it's just a little more likely that we don't draft a quarterback high in this upcoming draft and we kick it down the road to 2024 maybe, where if Geno signs a shorter term deal or basically any kind of deal that can be easily gotten out of after a few years, you've got Caleb Williams, you've got Anthony Richardson, you've got DJ Ugalele, you've got Quinn Ewers, you're going to have other guys as well. That might be a better QB class. And if Richardson comes out, by the way, if he decides to come out, he's going to be there for a later pick. And you could take him and say, we're going to sit him for a couple years behind Geno Smith. I'm not a huge fan of that philosophy, but you could do it. And Florida has other guys I like anyway, like Dexter. They've got I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but they've got another defensive tackle on that team that I like. And Texas A&M, let's not forget them in all this. They've got a couple guys who I find one guy in particular, Ogunbiyi, their left guard, one of my favorite left guards in this class. So enough stuff to watch at 9 a.m. on ESPN. 12:30 p.m. Next block, we have CBS, Tennessee versus Georgia, game of the week. You're probably going to be watching it anyway, but as a Seahawks fan, you should be watching it because of Hendon Hooker on Tennessee and Georgia. And look, I'm not in love with the prospects on Georgia as much as I would have been like last year. Last year, Georgia sent a ton of guys to the NFL. I don't know if they're going to have as much success this year. But Jalen Carter is becoming a real candidate for our top pick. And Cedric Van Pran is a very nice center prospect who I think you could get in a later round. So, Tennessee versus Georgia, it's the game of the week anyway. You're going to be watching it anyway. Hendon Hooker, look, admittedly, I'm a little off the Hendon Hooker train just because I don't know how that's going to be better than Geno, even though it's going to be a lot cheaper. But I still like him. I'm still open to it. I think it's a reasonable and potentially fruitful path for this team to take. So, yeah, we're going to keep an eye on him. This is his big test. Also at 12:30, we have on ESPN Oregon versus Colorado. Probably going to be a relatively easy game for Oregon, but Oregon, they have guys worth watching. I'm a little off Sewell at this point. I know who my linebackers are, and Sewell is not one of them. But Flo is nice. You could get him maybe in day 3, I think. And Bass, their left guard. So they still have players that I like. There's still interesting stuff happening over there at Oregon. By the way, I don't I'm not completely there yet, but some people are starting to circle the wagons around Bo Nix. So if you're looking for a maybe later round quarterback to get who you could develop, Bo Nix might be it. So there's another reason to watch Oregon maybe. He's playing well. I'm not sure if I see him as a pro prospect yet, but Bo Nix, not a terrible idea if you keep Geno around. Then you move to the late afternoon at 4 p.m. We have another pretty good game, Alabama versus LSU, ESPN, 4 p.m. Bama's just going to be must-see TV pretty much no matter what because they have so many interesting guys. Even as a person who's not a big Bryce Young fan, they've got multiple guys on that defensive line. Henry To'o, and they've got a kicker, they've got a left guard. It's just a smorgasbord of potential Seahawks guys. So pretty much whoever Alabama plays is going to be interesting, and LSU is not a bad opponent. LSU can do some things, so that's a pretty good game. I think the game across from it, though, at 4:30 on NBC is better. Clemson versus Notre Dame. I think that going forward, Clemson is going to be an automatic must-watch for Seahawks fans who are scouting the draft. Clemson has 3 guys who, if things continue to go the way that they are, I think are very likely to become a Seahawk. In fact, if we do not come out of this upcoming 2023 draft with at least one Clemson player, I will be shocked. And I think there's a very good chance, like maybe even we're approaching 40-45%, that our top pick goes to a Clemson player. You've got Brissy, you've got Murphy, you've got Trenton Simpson. All 3 of those guys are probably going to be first rounders. I think at least 2 of them are going to be high first rounders. They fill needs for this Seahawks team. Like if Clemson's on, you gotta watch. That defense is loaded with potential future Seahawks. And if I had to predict it right now, I would say one of those 3 guys I just mentioned will be a Seahawk next year. And Notre Dame, they have Jarrett Patterson, probably still my top center in this draft. He hasn't blown people away this year the way maybe we were hoping. But good prospect nevertheless. Very good game. Probably the most interesting game purely from a Seahawks perspective tomorrow, just because Clemson has become such an important team for us. 7:30 p.m. Fox Sports 1, UCLA versus Arizona State. It's not great. UCLA has Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who people are starting to like as a quarterback. He is a guy you might be able to get a little later, which makes sense for what we're probably going to end up doing. And people like Charbonnet, the running back, but he might be a pretty early pick. So not crazy about either of those guys, but it's worth watching. And that concludes the recommended viewing schedule for, what is this now, week 10 of college football? I think so. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. I'll be live on stream fairly soon here to watch the Huskies. Hope to see you there.